Hi all, and thanks for being with me. I'm going to talk about a subject which probably isn't going to get many hits and not many people are going to be interested in, primarily because it's about kids. And it's not about kids here in Australia, it is about kids in the United States. However, a lot of what I'm going to say does refer to the way we work around child protection here in Australia. And I just want to let you know that my background for a couple of decades now has been working around trying to improve the conditions under which kids are removed, the reasons why they're removed in the first place, and to help parents to better manage some behaviours which may cause those children's removals. So this particular video though is about two people by the name of Jodi Hildebrand, Ruby Frankie. So I'm going to talk about these two women in particular, and so some of you may have heard, if you come from the United States or if you watch YouTube videos or if you've been involved at some level with the YouTube videos that Ruby Frankie had particularly put out, then you may have encountered this particular woman. So a brief history is that she had a vlog which she started some years back when her children were relatively young, and she would film her activities with those children and certainly place that on YouTube. And she built up a very large following. Over 1 million people had subscribed to her channel. She became kind of this faux expert in parenting. She had no experience. She is a Mormon. Her and her partner had 6 children, and she had placed herself forward as the arbiter of what is right and what is wrong when it comes to parenting. And it got to a point though, later in those many years later, where some of the things she started to say and do started to twig with a few people, and people started to wonder, I wonder whether this is the appropriate way to behave in terms of parenting children. And some people became so concerned that they started a change.org application in order to see whether or not they could get enough people to say that this woman should be investigated by Child Protection Services. Now, there's a number of points I want to make in relation to this, and I'll play a little bit in a moment of Jodi Hildebrandt's particular trial and the judgments and so forth that came out against these two women. But what I do want to highlight, I guess, is that the mother, which is Ruby, she became influenced by a woman by the name of Jodi Hildebrand, who placed herself or promoted herself, I should say, as an expert in parenting, expert in counselling, and expert in relationships. And as a result of the relationships she built through an organisation that Jodi had started called Connections, Ruby became involved with her. They started this relationship or a partnership, and in that she started to influence, I think, the way Jodi viewed her world. Now, my sense was, and I haven't watched all the videos on this, I just went through it down a little bit of a rabbit hole in relation to this yesterday, and my sense was that there are a lot of conspiracies that were developed as a result of Hildebrandt's relationship with Jodi. So Jodi was the influencer in terms of the stuff she'd put out, but also Ruby was an influencer, but Jodi also was somewhat of an influence, but nowhere near the same sort of following or impact I think that Ruby had. Now, one of the issues that does concern me is that if you are an influencer and if you're following a person who you are influenced by, then one needs to be very wary of who they are, what their qualifications are, and whether they have the actual authority, the credentials, if you like, to be able to define themselves as the authority, or at least a person having significant information, academic information, if you like, in relation to the issues that they are propagating. So, and I would suggest that Jodi didn't. that Jodi was a con person, that she's narcissistic, she's definitely a psychopath given some of her behaviours. And she was able to focus on this other woman, Ruby, who was successful in terms of her YouTube channel and her discussions around her family growing up and whatever. Now, as time progressed, people became more and more sceptical about her. And what I'm concerned about is there are influencers out there who have large followings, who a lot of them do the right thing. A lot of them are saying stuff like I do, I guess, about things that matter to them. But they start influencing people in such negative, unhelpful ways, producing ideas and ways of working and behaving that are damaging to others. And that's exactly what Ruby did in relation to her children, to the point whereby her influence by Jodi, or her influence from Jodi, was so significant that she began to act in ways which were extremely, and I do mean extremely, damaging to the two youngest children. It is interesting also to note that Ruby's elder children have chosen not to have a relationship with her, and throughout all of this she's separated from her husband. There are no accusations made against him in terms of the abuse. It seemed to happen after a period after Ruby met Jodi, and then he at one point left the family under what turns out to be Jodi's request, because Jodi is a disruptor. Jodi is a dishonest person. Jodi is simply crazy. But she did have influence because people believe some of the crap that people put forward as being the expert in that particular area. And her area of expertise apparently was mental health. And clearly she had no understanding of this. And one of the things that I want to highlight in particular, I think, is that I'm a social worker, trained as a social worker, specialised in therapy, and particularly specialised in the area of working with families whose children have been removed. That is what I did. I'd spent 30 years doing this sort of work. Now, I don't consider myself an expert in any of this. I want you to know that. I consider myself as someone who's got some working knowledge about this and a practice model which I believe works. And I've done a lot of experimental type therapy in order to find out what things work with people and what don't, what doesn't, and that's proved to be very successful for me over the decades. Now, as counsellor develops a trust, it is important that we have a sense that what I'm doing is helpful to that other person. It's a position of being non-judgmental. It's not about making judgments about certain behaviours in relation to other people. It's simply about working through those issues. And it's certainly about, for me, as it has been over the years, about looking at people's strengths, regardless of who they are, regardless of those behaviours, to look at the strengths that they have that have helped them in many cases just to survive. And admiration of people has always been really important to me in my therapeutic work. And as a result of that, I would suggest that it's up for clients to say this, but I would suggest that it's been relatively successful. Now, we also come with a skill set that if we use that skill set in certain ways, it could be helpful, and hopefully it is, and we should be mindful of that all the time, or we can use our skill set in ways which are damaging. We can become controlling. We can start to convince people through questioning and through building that level of trust that we are the experts in everything, and therefore what I say to you is going to be the way you should behave. Now, we are not the experts, the client is the experts. It's the way I've always worked, always will. It's the way I just see the world, that other people are the experts in their own lives, and we need to build on that. We need to understand what their level of expertise is. So, but with Jodi, she used that. She used that skill set in order to control other people. And there are examples that have come forward of people that she supposedly worked with who have noticed the way that she has tried to control and manipulate them. And certainly the effort she's put into destroying relationships as a result of that. So she's a disruptor. She's not a builder, and she certainly was never she never had any understanding as to how to develop better relationships for people. She wanted to destroy them. And she wanted to do that, I think, with Ruby, unfortunately. Now, all of this came about when she decided that her and Ruby were going to punish two of the children, the youngest children. The others had left, they were elsewhere, and she was going to punish them and starve them, in fact, tie them up, beat them, make them do the most unreasonable things like going out in the snow barefooted and having to do exercises and do chores. There's a whole range of horrific behaviours that Jodi and Ruby made these children do. And it wasn't until the 12-year-old escaped one day and went to a neighbour and they called the police, and from that particular point, it went all arse about for Ruby and for Jodi. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this is that this couple, this family, was also seen as being middle class. Remember, Ruby had made a small fortune, in fact, from her YouTube channel. And as a result of that, she was perceived as being a successful parent, middle class parent, maybe even upper class, given the amount of money she had earned. And that the children, when the department arrived at this house on various occasions, they could see this, what appeared to be a very articulate woman, and she is, and a lovely clean house, and the kids didn't seem to be physically hurt or whatever. And so the department workers, the social workers, left thinking that she was doing the right thing by these kids. The reality is that she wasn't. But one social worker left on one occasion and said, I could learn some things from you about parenting, given the way these kids are, not knowing and not doing a thorough investigation. However, if these children were if these children were in a household which was not middle to upper class, where there was shit scattered throughout the house and it was untidy and unkept, and they looked unkept, even though they might have been treated well, the chances are that the children would have been removed or the investigation would have gone up to a different level. But no, this is what happens. And this happens in Australia, it happens all over the world. Social workers go into a place, they fail to investigate because what appears to be middle class is okay, and what isn't middle class, what is a low social and economic background and the housing conditions are poor, then they continue with the investigation and are more likely to remove the children. Whereas in this case, they should have removed the children years ago when they were first notified of what was happening in this home, but they chose not to. So one of the videos so I'll just play a little bit of this because this is the judge making a statement in relation to Jodi, and it's interesting some of the things that he has to say, so I'll just play this for you.
Again, the sentence was stipulated at the time of the plea agreement. What record do we need to make other than going forward with sentencing?
Your Honor, it would be repetitive. I had the same statement just with the last few paragraphs where I was differentiating between Ms. Frank and Ms. Hildebrand.
Okay, let's talk about housekeeping matters first. What about restitution?
We've stipulated to keep that open for 8 months.
It is appropriate, Your Honor, since we don't have any evidence with respect to restitution, and that's because it is still in the process of being gathered by
The interesting thing between these two women, so this is Jodi Hildebrand's case, the difference between these two women is that Jodi demonstrates no remorse and apparently made some comments to the media that at some level this was the children's fault and this was an attack on it. So it was this Trumpian response, if you like, to what was happening to her. Whereas opposed to Ruby in her statement, which I could show and I won't, you can see all this on YouTube through Law and Crime website, YouTube channel. But the difference was that Ruby was definitely had an understanding that what she had done was wrong, whereas Jodi didn't have that level of understanding, because psychopaths don't. So my sense was that I was far more empathetic to Ruby, even though she was the mother and she caused this to happen and she got sucked into Jodi's way of doing things. It is still evident that she understands what happened, how it happened, and how damaging this was for her children. Now, as a result of all of this, these people are only going to spend probably 4 years in jail. I think that they should spend longer. That the lesson that should be learned here is that you behave in this way, a 10-year term would be appropriate in these particular cases. But the legal fraternities say that it's likely to only be about 4 or 5 years, and that'll be it. So the lessons are, watch out for influencers. Even me. I'm not an influencer. I have 230 subscribers. Who gives a shit? But be careful of those people that you listen to who are giving advice to you if they do not have the qualifications to do so. They might be young, they might appear to be influential, they might appear to know what they're saying, but if they have no experience, apart from simply, in this case, being a parent, then one's got to wonder what is the value of what it is that they have to say. So this is an unusual video for me to do because it's not political in that sense. It has political undertones in terms of child protection, but it's not really political. But subscribe to my channel if you like, ring the bell, do whatever you need to do to inform you when there are new videos put up. So I'll leave it at that. But thanks for being with me, everybody. And just remember, take care, look after yourselves, look after your children in particular, and be safe.